W.H. Auden wrote, for the time being, a Christmas oratorio, these words. At least we know for certain that we are three old sinners, that this journey is much too long, that we want our dinners and miss our wives, our books, our dogs, but have only the vaguest idea why we are what we are. To discover how to be human now is the reason we follow the star. Although the Magi usually show up in most of our telling of the Christmas event in the pageants and so on, we get their story wrong most of the time. Eventually, what we do is cut and paste them, the Magi, that is, out of Matthew's gospel and into the Luke story, having them show up on the night of Jesus' birth along with the shepherds. It's easier to stage it that way, really. But when you actually read Matthew, you see that they didn't arrive just as Jesus was being born. They got there months and perhaps even as much as 2 years afterward. That means, of course, that their arrival wasn't part of the story of Jesus' birth at all. No, they dragged their tired bodies into town after Jesus had been around a while, after the miracle of his birth had long since worn off. And Mary and Joseph were just exhausted parents of an infant or toddler and apparently settled in Bethlehem instead of going back to Nazareth. That is, if you're trying to put the two stories together anyway. And that whole thing about them being wise men, what's so wise about leaving your homes to trek across the desert with only the vaguest notion of what it is you're even looking for? That doesn't necessarily make them wise. It does make them seekers. What's so wise about going to Herod Antipas, that brutal old reprobate, to ask about where the new king is? The king who presumably was going to replace Herod? Didn't they do their homework, obviously? And what was so wise about showing up to a baby shower with those mysterious gifts? And Mary and Joseph really needed, what they really needed was a whole bunch of diapers and baby clothes and a book about the first years. The first years, parenting a savior. Well, okay, admittedly, the gold would help with some of those necessities anyway. No, from where I sit, the Magi have one thing going for them. One reason why on Epiphany we read their story and we remember them. They're somewhat like us. That's why they, like us, have taken the long expected journey of Advent. They, like us, have lived through the miracle of the birth of God, the birth of God incarnate. And they, like we who are standing on the brink of bleak January, are at this point still sinners, still uncertain, and yet still seeking. In many ways, Epiphany is the sort of anti-climax of the Christmas season. By the time we get to January 6th, which finally ends the season, technically, the holiday has already come and gone. We're basically tired of Christmas. We've dragged back into our, we are dragged back into our regular lives after the holidays. Whether we go to work or whatever, we're back to the mundane routines of daily living and existence. Maybe gone kicking and screaming, but nonetheless. Any false good cheer or phony happy feelings have long since evaporated, and we are already starving on our New Year's diets. Still guilt-ridden about our lack of exercise routine. Maybe a little depressed that, well, those days off and holidaying are again behind us. Whether working at home or going to another location, our lives are different than during the holidays. And we are probably wondering where to go from here. Magic, in other words, has worn off. But the truth of the incarnation is that God comes and meets us in the nitty-gritty, the down and dirty realities of life on this sad little ball of mud we call Earth. Every year we arrive at Epiphany having thought that this year, this time, the Christmas season would magically transform us, bringing about peace on earth and peace in our hearts and changing what else has happened in the year into something more wonderful. And yet, as 12th night, that's Epiphany, when Epiphany or when Christmas ends, the day Christmas ends, it comes and goes. We will find ourselves little different than we were. No more loving, no more wise, no more certain of what it was that we were seeking in the first place. And it's in this state that we discover ourselves ready to meet the Christ child, who is in the end the one who will actually find us. We remember the Magi on Epiphany because, having shown up long after all the miraculous stuff was over, they still discovered the genuine miracle. The God who comes to us and abides with us just where we are and as we are. Emmanuel, God is with us. God is with us, regular people with regular lives. Then, after they were witness to the miracle, they continued on in their lives, moving on when they recognized the danger. And we remember them for their willingness to take a chance on the rage of a foreign king, for their willingness to do what needed to be done, not just to find the child, but to protect and care for that child, for recognizing justice and seeking the right, rather than taking the easy and familiar way. They took another road, a different road. This year, looming before us, opens up to us many opportunities to seek justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God, which the prophet Micah tells us that that is what God requires of us. Our world is full of things that are not right. It's full of people in power who would take advantage of the weak and the poor, who hold hostage the politicians and disdain the masses in order to line their own pockets. Those Herods, those who would let hundreds of thousands die, who would put the planet itself at risk again and again rather than to lose their own place among the wealthy ruling class. Those who wage war for profit, who live in the lap of luxury while homeless haunt the doorways, and children die in detention. And the old lose their pensions, and the young go into debt for life in order to get an education. Today is a time that though technically advanced, we are still not that far from first century Palestine, where King Herod would use his power to destroy anyone who threatens his position. The land was a war zone in which an occupancy army wandered the streets. People lost their livelihood to the tribute system of Caesar. The poor bore the brunt of taxation. No, they took another road. They resisted the pull of the familiar. They saved the life of Jesus because they would not be complicit with the evil empire that would destroy him. So often we do the same things over and over with no different results than the last time that we tried them. There's a saying about that, proving that we are not such wise people. Perhaps it's time to start doing something different, even perhaps a road yet untried. We have the choice. We have the choice also, as they did, to take a different way as a society and as a church. Rather than buying into the consumerism that feeds the hungry monsters of big business, we can all take a different road, buying only what we need, being generous with others, and purchasing from small business and local sources whenever possible, especially now in order to help keep some of those businesses in business, and especially from companies where employees are treated well and paid fairly. Rather than feed our children to the gods of war, we can take a different road, resisting the urge toward war making, making use of the democratic process we have, which was not available in ancient Palestine. Finally, make an end to war, as well as an end to torture and mistreatment of political prisoners. Rather than buy into a culture of selfishness and greed, we could take another road toward equality for everyone, toward basic food and shelter and healthcare and rights for all people, starting down the path of sharing our own resources and joining the road where a new society and its laws value people above profit and care for all persons equally. Rather than travel the road of violence again and again, we can choose another path toward reasonable gun regulation and an ideal of personal non-violence in our families, in our relationships, where there's respect and always listening and always compromise. We've taken a long journey, witnessed the miracle, and standing on the front end of this year, still sinners, still seekers, and as such, accepted by God as we are offered more than one path to travel. Will we comply with the powers of this world and take the same road again and again and again, being complicit with those powers to destroy the miracle of God? Or will we take a different road this year, this time? Will we take a path that leads toward life, toward God, toward godly values, toward equality and love, toward peace and grace-filled living? Yes, Christmas is past. Emmanuel was born. God is still with us, offering us alternative paths, the same paths we've taken before, or better roads that lead us home and bring protection and love and justice to the refugee, the homeless, to those feeling oppression and danger, to those in need, those who are suffering, those dying. Which way will we take? Let's not go again the same way we came. Let's not make the same mistakes again and again. But take all God's alternative road so that all may be free and loved and protected.